in triumphantly through a crowd that had despaired of ever seeing this day. Peter Magyar, Hungarian flag held aloft, and with it the promise that his country's 16-year-long slide into authoritarianism ends now.
Hello, welcome to Media Watch. I'm Linton Besser. And we travel first tonight to the Pearl of the Danube, where millions have uncorked the Palinka and thousands taken to the streets in celebration of the ouster of Viktor Orbán.
Let this day be written in gold letters in the history of Hungarian freedom, the victory of freedom against oppression.
8 days ago, the Prime Minister-elect Peter Magyar swept away 16 years of Orbán's rule in an election for the ages, prompting one likely cabinet member to cut a rug. While a ways down the river, Orbán was in less of a groove.
The election result is painful for us, but clear.
More than two-thirds of the country's electorates voted out the far-right populist leader, whose reign transformed Hungary from a champion of democratic freedom into an oligarchy, and whom, having drifted into the arms of Vladimir Putin, became known as the Victator. Crucial to his long dominance, a steady dismantling of the press, the sacking of more than 1,600 journalists from the public broadcaster, replacing them with pro-government talking heads, and the establishment of a new regulator stacked with Orbán's cronies, and which set about scrutinising the balance and the morality of independent television, radio and print reporting.
The new regulatory body, headed by a close ally of Orbán, can impose major fines on media outlets and force journalists to reveal sources,
prompting Hungary's newspaper of record to forecast on page one the death of that country's freedom of the press, a prophecy which, for it at least, came true 5 years later.
Journalists working for Indepth found themselves locked out
when it was acquired by an Orbán ally, then permanently shuttered. At about the same time, another popular news outlet, independent website Origo, was defanged by its new owner, another Orbán associate, and turned into one of the Prime Minister's most dutiful boosters. Piece by piece, the country's media organs fell into line, many of them similarly bought up by Orbán's mates, then, get this, donated to a pro-government conglomerate, Kesma, formed in 2018, that incorporated nearly 500 print, online, radio and TV channels, with Orbán explaining to a giddy right-wing audience that none of this was accidental.
Legyen médiánk. A progresszív baloldal őrültségeit csak akkor tudjuk bemutatni, ha van média, ami segít ebben.
A small number of independent and investigative outfits persisted, documenting the steady corruption of Hungary's institutions of state and exposing, just last month, a conspiracy hatched by Hungary's secret service to frame two men associated with the opposition party as child pornographers, while one of the country's most prominent journalists investigating murky ties between Budapest and Moscow was 2 days later charged with espionage. Orbán himself describes journalists as stink bugs, deserving of eradication, and independent media as fake news. A much-loved tactic of Orbán's fans on the other side of the Atlantic, one of whom was dispatched to Budapest to put the boss on speakerphone.
I love Hungary and I love that Viktor. I'll tell you, he's a fantastic man. We've had a tremendous relationship.
The incoming Prime Minister, Peter Magyar, has vowed to restore independence to Hungary's media, explaining live on air to the state broadcaster its days were numbered. But so much harm has been done to the very concept of journalism in Hungary, its practitioners remain sceptical.
The system that was built over the past decade and a half is deeply entrenched. Media ecosystems cannot just be reset by political decisions.
Viktor Orbán liked to boast he had turned Hungary into an illiberal democracy, and this damaging transformation, now so thoroughly rejected by his people, offers sharp lessons, including for Australia, about the price that can be paid when the independence of public broadcasting is compromised and the press is permitted to become so highly concentrated. It's happening right now in the United States, and there's no reason it couldn't happen here too. And now to some jolly news for lovers of the GGs.
World-class training facilities have been added at the Scone Race Club in another boost for the horse capital of Australia.
A boon for the New South Wales town of Scone 2 weeks ago when the racing minister posed for happy snaps and pushed out this press release celebrating the state's multi-million-dollar Racing for the Regions program. Readily picked up the following day in a glowing tribute by the Daily Telegraph, which, not awkward at all, coincided with other news about that very government program that very same day.
Racing New South Wales landed $58 million grant with no deadline, no verification.
A damning report from the New South Wales Auditor-General raises questions both about the oversight of the Racing for Regions grants program and also the adequacy of financial oversight of Racing New South Wales. The grant funding was handed directly to Racing New South Wales, headed by influential Chief Executive Peter V'landys.
And who is Peter V'landys? Only the country's most powerful sports administrator, head of the New South Wales Racing Regulator, chairman of the Australian Rugby League Commission, and a man who's been known to enjoy just a spot of influence over the press, as we walked you through last year, thanks in part to the millions of dollars his organisation channels into the racing pages of the Sydney Morning Herald and the Daily Telegraph, an annual press junket to the NRL season launch in Las Vegas, and the famous hospitality he puts on at Royal Randwick, where journos and politicians applied with 3-course meals and free grog. All of which, at least while he was navigating the pandemic, was a rather sound investment.
Having, the major decision makers in the media ringing the politicians and etc. paid enormous dividends, and there's a lot of stories I could tell you, which I can't because we're filming it, how politicians changed their views very quickly when there was media pressure on them.
So how did Peter V'landys, better known as PVL, react to that broadside from the Auditor-General and the coverage it received in the Sydney Morning Herald? He picked up the phone and complained bitterly to the newspaper, claiming the article was inaccurate and unfair. And would you believe it, 24 hours later, Racing New South Wales yanked its $1.5 million deal to sponsor the Sydney Morning Herald's racing pages, its logo scrubbed ever since. This little dispute could not have come at a worse time for the publisher of the Herald, Nine Entertainment, because while it's squabbling with V'landys about news stories in his capacity as head of Racing New South Wales, it is negotiating a $1 billion rights deal also with V'landys in his capacity as chairman of the NRL, which might go some way to explaining this rather craven statement from Nine's spinner in defence of its journalism.
Nine highly values our relationship with Racing New South Wales, and we continue to discuss how we can evolve our partnership.
Peter V'landys has never been shy about expressing his displeasure with certain journalism, recently sicking lawyers onto a small racing website which had the temerity to question whether the mighty PVL really can juggle 2 major sports. This extraordinary lawsuit was reported on page 1 and 3 of Nine's Australian Financial Review, joining a string of other hard-nosed reports by the paper, including this investigation, and by its Nine stablemate, the Herald. V'landys, it seems, has become so troubled by these straight up-and-down pieces of journalism, he's beginning to suspect conspiracy, telling The Australian last month there were credible rumours that
recent negative coverage in the Sydney Morning Herald, which Nine owns, about racing governance has been about influencing broadcast talks.
One reason V'landys might be having trouble coming to terms with the Herald's tough reporting is because of the persistently obsequious output of its rival, the Daily Telegraph, which failed to report that damning audit anywhere at all. And I reckon that's exactly how you stay on Peter V'landys' Christmas card list. It also doesn't hurt to plump up the man's pet projects, like these puffy promotions of a new Racing New South Wales funded doco about prize-winning jockey James McDonald, or J-Mac. The film, with its behind-the-scenes access, enjoyed a red carpet premiere at Sydney's IMAX cinema in March, attended by racing royalty, not least PVL himself, as well as one rather well-known business figure who lauded the film's director.
He was incredibly impressed with the dedication and the hard work J-Mac puts into everything. So
And who was that director? A 21-year-old named Caelan Murdoch, who is, yes, Lachlan's son.
It's been a year, but it's flown by.
We asked Racing New South Wales to explain the governance process by which it selected the younger Murdoch to direct this film and whether it was actually trying to curry favour. And this was PVL's response.
Caelan Murdoch is an individual in his own right, irrespective of his parentage. I find it inhumane that you would attempt to destroy a young man's self-esteem and worth to satisfy your agenda and ideology.
As for cancelling the Herald's sponsorship deal, there's no evidence PVL's decision was linked to his editorial complaint, the contract having already expired and Racing New South Wales having weeks earlier sought data on the performance of the form guide. But I cannot believe for a second that PVL, with his history of both duchessing and lambasting the press, had managed to strip himself of his irritation with the paper's reporting when he iced the deal. Even though he tells us that tough journalism is all just water off a duck's back.
I have learned to live with unfair reporting regarding myself, just like I did in the last time Media Watch presented a very one-sided, unbalanced and unfair critique on me.
Meanwhile, a spokesperson for the Daily Telegraph assured us that PVL gets upset with it too from time to time, and
nothing constrains our ability to report as we see fit.
It so happens that this colourful episode has arrived on an auspicious occasion, Saturday's 195th anniversary of the Sydney Morning Herald's first edition. And we can think of no better way that the newsroom's present custodians could have celebrated its storied history than by flexing its determination to print the news no matter the pressure. Long may it continue. And now to the most urgent of the very many torments afflicting modern life. What to do with all the bloody photos on our phones.
Piece together your favourite memories, literally. Create your own photo jigsaw puzzle with Photo Bookshop.
Yes, what better way to cherish those special moments than turning them into a jazzy jigsaw, courtesy of the good folk over at Photo Bookshop, whose customers are so enthused with its many products they've taken to the internet to say so.
I feel like I'm holding a collectible art book. But how funny and how surreal that all the art inside this book is my own.
How funny, how surreal. And what about all those inspiring mottos you might otherwise forget?
I jumped on Photo Bookshop and ordered custom wall art, and look at the transformation.
Advertising so good you couldn't pay for it, except of course it did. Which one online influencer, Gracie McMahon, discovered when Photo Bookshop tried to enlist her too, with the offer of free product in return for one Instagram reel and 5 photos. Plus, she might be interested in a nice little commission on future sales. But hold on, what's this?
Please ensure your videos do not mention that the product is free or sponsored, or that Photo Bookshop contacted you to create them in exchange for products.
Oh, sneaky. And Gracie was having none of it, telling the Australian company behind Photo Bookshop that
not disclosing the partnership, gifting from a brand is highly illegal. Please ensure you fix this.
And for good measure, she grasped, prompting an investigation by the consumer watchdog, which 2 weeks ago slapped the company with a fine of almost $40,000. Never before has a business been held to account for deceiving customers via covert online advertising in this way. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission identifying more than 100 occasions on which Photo Bookshop ordered influencers to conceal payments of up to $400 in return for publishing company-friendly propaganda. And yet, just last week, we still found posts like these. Lucy Hawkins promoting her redecoration ideas, and Rebecca Connolly gushing over Photo Bookshop's seamless service. Lucy told us she had accepted a gift from the company, while Rebecca would not say either way. But after our impudent emails and messages, both pulled down their posts. And when we spoke to Oat Cap Babe, whose name in the real world is Priyanka Pendam, she agreed.
The disclosure may not have been as clear as it should have been. Once this was brought to my attention, I updated the post.
And to her credit, indeed she did. In researching this story, we found dozens of posts on Instagram alone plugging Photo Bookshop and reaching a potential 250,000 users. The genuine opinions and the paid opinions often utterly indistinguishable, which the company must have missed in the clean-up program it promised it had undertaken since the ACCC's meddling.
A small number of old posts were identified and have since been corrected or taken down. Thank you for pointing this out.
Glad to be of service, Peter. A spokesperson for the ACCC told us it expects all businesses to comply with Australian consumer law, which
applies as much to the digital world as it does to bricks and mortar retailers.
Just 2 years ago, the ACCC found more than 80% of suspicious influencer posts it investigated were potentially deceiving their followers in this shabby way, leaving the Commission in the unenviable position of playing whack-a-mole, trying to police a staggering number of pretenders shilling for brands and hiding it from their trusting audience. Almost makes you pine for the dreaded mainstream media. And that's all from us tonight. Be sure to check us out on ABC iView as well as YouTube and Facebook. You can find full statements on our website. And don't forget to send us your tips. See you next week.